Every evening at exactly 7:30 p.m., Thomas walks to the front door of his small wooden house at the end of Maple Street. He does not rush. He does not look at the clock anymore. His body simply knows when it is time. 3 slow steps from the living room, past the old wooden cabinet filled with dusty photographs, across the floorboards that creak beneath his weight, and then his hand reaches for the light switch beside the door. Click! The porch light turns on. A soft yellow glow spills into the darkness outside. It stretches gently across the empty porch, touches the worn steps, and reaches the quiet sidewalk where no one ever stops. Thomas stands there for a moment after turning it on. He does not expect to see anyone. He does not expect a knock. Still, he waits a few seconds before stepping back. He has been doing this for 12 years. 12 winters. 12 springs. 12 summers where the air felt to still. 12 autumns when the leaves gathered in silent piles along the edge of the porch. The neighbors used to ask him why he left the light on every night, expecting someone. One of them once asked with a gentle smile. Thomas smiled back. "I just prefer the house not to look empty," he said. But that was not the real reason. The real reason stood in that doorway 12 years ago, with a suitcase in his hand. "I'll be back soon, Dad," his son had said. "Just a few months. I promise." Thomas had nodded. He was never a man of many words. Instead of giving a long speech, instead of showing the fear that quietly pressed against his chest, he placed a hand on his son's shoulder and said softly, "I'll leave the light on." At the time, it felt like a simple sentence. He did not know it would become a ritual. The first few months passed with patience. Thomas kept the phone beside his chair. He turned the ringer louder than usual. Every time it rang, his heart lifted slightly before settling back down again. Most calls were from telemarketers or distant relatives who had little to say. None of them were the voice he waited for. Winter arrived early that year. Snow covered the porch steps. The wind slipped through the cracks of the old windows, and the house felt larger when it was silent. That was when Thomas began turning on the porch light earlier than usual. Darkness felt heavier in winter. It pressed against the windows like a quiet reminder of absence. An empty house at night has its own language. The ticking clock sounds like distant footsteps. The heater turning on sounds like a door closing. Even the wind brushing against the siding can sound like breathing. And every small sound carries the same question. Is that him? John did not expect anyone to notice him that night. He sat quietly on the cold wooden bench at the bus stop, his thin coat barely protecting him from the wind. The city moved fast around him, cars passing, people rushing home, lights glowing from apartment windows. To everyone else, he was invisible, just another old man with tired eyes and worn-out shoes. But John was not always invisible. Many years ago, he had a family, a wife who laughed loudly at his silly jokes, a little girl who used to run into his arms every evening when he came home from work. He worked as a construction worker for more than 30 years. His hands were strong then, rough but steady. He built houses for other families while dreaming about growing old in his own warm home. Life, however, had different plans. His wife passed away after a long illness. Hospital bills slowly swallowed his savings. His daughter moved to another country, promising to visit soon. At first, she called every week, then once a month. Then his silence. John never blamed her. He told himself she must be busy. He told himself she was happy, and that was enough. When he lost his job due to his age and weak health, things became harder. Rent increased. Prices went up. His body grew slower. Eventually, he could no longer afford the apartment. Pride kept him from asking for help. He packed his belongings into 2 small bags and stepped into a world that suddenly felt colder than ever before. Now, the bus stop had become his temporary shelter. That night, he held an old photograph in his shaking hands. It was slightly torn at the corners. In the picture, his daughter was smiling brightly, sitting on his shoulders at the beach. The memory warmed him more than his coat ever could. He closed his eyes and whispered softly, "I hope you're safe." He did not notice the young woman standing a few meters away, watching him quietly. Emily had seen him there for 3 nights in a row. At first, she thought he was just waiting for someone, but each night, he remained long after the last bus had passed. Something about the way he held that old photograph made her heart ache. On the 4th night, she finally walked toward him. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked gently. John looked up, surprised. It had been a long time since someone spoke to him with kindness. He tried to smile. "I'm fine, just resting." Emily noticed the thin blanket beside him and the small bags at his feet. She understood without needing more explanation. Without saying much, she handed him a warm cup of coffee. "It's cold tonight," she said softly. John hesitated before accepting it. His hands trembled not only from the cold, but from the unfamiliar feeling of being cared for. "Thank you," he whispered. They talked for a few minutes. John didn't share everything, but he shared enough. Emily listened, really listened, not with pity, but with respect. The next evening, she returned, this time with a sandwich. The night after that, with a thicker blanket. Small things, simple gestures, but to John, they felt enormous. 1 week later, Emily brought something different. "I spoke to a community shelter," she said carefully. "They have a room available. It's warm, safe, just until you get back on your feet." John's eyes filled with tears he had tried so hard to hide. He wasn't crying because he felt weak. He was crying because for the first time in a long while, he felt seen. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. Emily smiled. "You already did. You reminded me that kindness still matters." As John stood up from that bus stop for the last time, he looked around at the cold street that had been his home. The city lights were still the same. Cars still rushed by. People still hurried forward. But something had changed. He was no longer invisible. And somewhere far away, perhaps his daughter would one day learn that even in the darkest moments, a single act of kindness can rebuild a life just like he once built houses for others. Because sometimes hope does not arrive loudly. Sometimes it simply walks up to you and says, "Are you okay?"